Welcome to a brand new show for Premier Sports. It's Rugby League Back Chat, and over the next few months we're going to be tackling all the big issues in the game, no holds barred. We're coming from the Arc at the centre of Headingley, and we're joined, of course, by a very distinguished panel, this being our first show. A panel, three men who between them have 46 caps playing for Great Britain. Let me introduce them. First of all, Danny Lockwood, who's the publisher of League Weekly, the weekly rugby league magazine. Gary Schofield, the former Huddersfield coach, amongst other things, of course. And Chris Irvin, who's the rugby league correspondent for the Times and the Sunday Times. So let's start at the very beginning. We've got this brand new rugby league, new era this year. How's it going, fellas? How are you finding the new season?
Pretty good, although I do think there was a little bit of a false dawn before the World Club Series. I really thought last weekend, especially with the big Leeds Huddersfield game, that the season had started, if you like. And I look forward to it kicking on from here. I think the form book so far, Dave, has shown us that it's all to play for, and as Red Hall would love to tell us, every minute counts.
Well, you mentioned there, Dan, it's all to play for, but also I think the teams have been inconsistent. If you look at who would have fought after 3 games, you know, Castleford and Huddersfield being at the bottom, and you know, the two teams who we anticipated to be at the top, St Helens and Leeds. So overall, I think it's been a little bit inconsistent by some of the teams we expected, certainly, to be in the top 8 so far.
Yeah. We're getting some close games as well, which is encouraging. You've got rid of perhaps what was the deadwood with the Broncos and Bradford Bulls. I think the competition is benefiting from, so far, and it's early days, it's benefiting from having 12 clubs. And we're getting some more competitive games early part of the season.
And I think, as to pick up on Scoy's point, I don't think that Paul Anderson at Huddersfield or Darryl Powell at Castleford Tigers will be that dispirited. I think they saw enough, and they've seen enough improvement.
But Danny, it's the way you start this season. We've always talked in the past about the way you finish, but the way you start, and regardless of that, Castleford and Huddersfield, results-wise, have started badly.
But I think from a point of view there, when you look at the Castleford and Huddersfield performances, they're not that far off, are they? You know, they're not that far off.
That's what I mean.
You look at Hull, they've only won 1 game out of 3, but also if you look at the performances and the score lines, they're not that far off. But I think as well, I think so far, I think the performance, not just off last week, but I think the performance of the season so far has got to be Hull KR beating Wigan. They showed the character to come back, certainly, after the 14-point deficit. So yeah, well done to Hull KR and Chris Chester.
It's a really topsy-turvy situation, isn't it? Because you've got St Helens who've won 3 out of 3, and frankly, haven't looked brilliant, have they? I mean, all right.
And Luke Walsh still not.
Luke Walsh still not back, and let's hope he's back soon. Against Salford, who were pretty poor. You've got Leeds, who, you know, Brian McDermott says have not been close to their best so far. And yet, as you say, Huddersfield, Paul Anderson will say 2 games out of 3, they've actually played quite well. Castleford, 3 games out of 3, they could have won all 3.
To be honest with you, Dave, Paul Anderson's saying now, we're a good side. You know, we're a good team, and I'm pretty happy the way we're playing, and they're the bottom of the league. So that just tells you everybody at the moment, not really settled in. I don't think everybody's playing to the best of their ability, and it's just inconsistency at the moment with performances.
I know what you say, Chris, about having to come out of the blocks, and it's how you start this season because they've all got to make the top 8. But that's a long way off yet, and I actually think, just looking around some of the results and the form and the squads, that probably a lot of our predictions are not going to be that far off when the shake-up comes.
I'm quoting a Huddersfield Giants fan who I was talking to the other day, very disappointed at the start, lost 3, and think, well, can we actually finish in the top now? Yeah. It's early days, and this is a very differently configured
That's my
season.
big worry about this format, is that it's no longer about finishing the 8. Because in the past you could finish 6th and 7th and you still had a chance of winning the grand final. You've got to be in the top 4 at the end of the playoffs to have a chance of the ground. If you're a Huddersfield and you go into that last 8 and you're 7th and 8th and you're a few points adrift of that top 4, your season's almost over before the playoffs begin.
But don't we think that this season, above all probably in recent years, anybody can beat anybody, Woodsy? Because I certainly do. And if you look at the way Leeds finished last season, which was absolutely, you know, catastrophic really, I think they'd swap a big finish. And they've shown what they can do coming from, you know, behind the back and winning away games.
Early days, but do you think the playing standard, this is all about raising playing standards as well, part of that, do you think the playing standards are better this season so far than the one you described as possibly the worst Super League season that you'd witnessed last year?
Well, I guess time will tell on that, but we've not mentioned one team yet, and we was waiting for his debut, and what a debut it was for Catalans, wasn't it, Tom Carney, and I tell you what, they might just sneak under the radar, and for mine, certainly with that performance with the 2 halfbacks, what they've got, and playing behind that pack of forwards, and the way the halfbacks was allowed to express themselves, I tell you what, don't write off Catalans finishing the top 4. I was going to say,
a lot of people have been talking about Carney and forgetting about Duro, because he's a world-class halfback anyway. Obviously had his injury problems.
It's like having a new superstar in the team, isn't it, given his last couple of years. But that was, for me, the standout. OK, Hull KR beating Wigan was great. But the way that they dismantled Warrington at the weekend, to me, was the standout performance so far, early days, but so far this season.
I agree, Danny. I thought they were tremendous. And Todd Carney, he was like hand in glove, wasn't it? I mean, Giroud kind of led the thing, but Carney, to set up the second try by Zeb Taylor, wonderful bit of work as well. But let's not forget, I think the highlight, and it's gone viral on the internet, Rangi Chase, and what he did for Salford against Hull was absolutely magical.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, you mentioned the performance of Rangi Chase there, but I tell you what a learning curve it has been for the young Wallington halfback Gareth O'Brien, because for the last 2 games he's played against Widdop and Benji Marshall, and also the two guys at the Catalans. Just what a learning period it has been for him, because quite clearly, you know, he's got a lot to do to get to that sort of standard if he's got the ambition of playing for his country.
Well, and a painful experience as well,
yeah,
Scully.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, the Rangi Chase stuff, and of course Salford needed that win, you know, like no one. Obviously the Tim Sheens effect, you know, he comes, sits in the stand to win a game. But Rangi's great, and yeah, and I've watched it about I had to watch it 4 times before I could work out how the heck the ball got out. But it's a circus act, isn't it?
Well, at the end of the day, we know exactly what Rangi Chase can do, and when you can take the shackles off him when he's not playing to a structure, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, Salford are playing to the Wigan structure, whether the Salford fans like it or, you know, Iestyn Harris is quite, you know, he's looking to deny that fact. But I tell you what, give the freedom for Rangi Chase to do what he does, then Salford will win more games than what the losers.
Do we get the feeling that Salford are sorting themselves out now? Gareth Locke's gone. So. Yeah. Locke looks like he's going to Scottish Rugby Union.
Well, is he, Dave? I don't know if he is going to Scottish Rugby Union. All the intimation was that maybe he's staying now.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys, I don't know how you feel about it, but the way that Kevin Locke has perceived himself at Salford, not just at the end of last season, but this year as well, if I was the owner there, if I was the coach, I'd be saying to Kevin Locke, quite clearly, do you want to play for Salford? Because of the attitude and the commitment you show at the moment, you're not giving me any indication whatsoever. You've one last chance, if not, you're on your bike.
It's like coaching a bag of snakes at times at Salford, isn't it? I mean, and it maybe, OK, Hock's gone, Locke, we're not quite sure. I don't think there are any other disruptive characters there, you know, but they did show the way against Hull. They have got some amazingly talented players, you know, Ben Jones, Bishop, 1 or 2 others. They should be doing well.
They've got some, Chris, but they've not got enough. And I think, I disagree a little bit with Gary, because Rangi Chase is a circus act. He's fantastic to watch. He's the guy the kids go to see. He's the one they go away with the memory of. But you know, he did that little party trick at the weekend on first tackle. That ball could have ended up in the 5th row of the stands.
But he didn't. But it didn't.
But more often than not, it does, and that's why when Castleford were a better team last year without him, because I don't think that Rangi knows what he's going to do.
Well, he doesn't.
So sure as heck, his teammates don't. And I don't think that you're going to get a top 4, top 6 finish in Super League with that kind of anarchic approach to rugby league.
Well, I guess one question it'll be, because Rangi was playing at fullback, so is his best position for Salford at fullback? Because quite clearly, I don't think that combination between Chase and Dobson is going to work.
Well, you can't have 2 bosses, can you?
Dobson didn't look great against St Helens. Is that a worry for Salford? The fact that Dobson is the signing who really should be steadying the ship this year for Salford?
Maybe, but again, it's the influence of Rangi Chase. You know, can the 2 play together? I don't think they can do. And one of them, I know myself. We're playing with Sean and playing with Andy Gregg. You know, one of them has got to be the main playmaker, and one of them will sulk. Don't get me wrong. You know, at times myself and Greg and Sean, when we was told one of them was going to be the leader, then it didn't go down too very well. But that's the nucleus of a team when you're looking for success. But if Dobson is told that he's going to be the number 1 go-to guy, then I'm sure you'll see the best of Dobson. If not, then that halfback partnership is going to struggle.
Salford's next game is against Catalans, and they're going to go up against Giroud and they're going to go up against Carney.
They're going to find out what it's like in the real world, because and I think that halfbacks are critical to how this competition will be sorted out.
Yeah.
You know, there are only so many stellar talents about. You look at Ben Roberts, not really settled very well at Castleford yet. We got, you know, all the goings on at Salford as ever, which I think is actually just a syndrome of being managed essentially by Dr. Kukash. You know, and then you look around the league and say, well, where are the halves that are going to win this competition? And I think you keep looking back to the south of France.
Yeah.
Well, also as well, when you look at it from an English point of view, you know, the 2 best pairing halfbacks are at St Helens, with Luke Walsh is fit and Travis Burns, and then the two at Catalan. So internationally, you know, we got that sort of quality at halfbacks. We haven't, but it's going to be interesting. And I say that with the quality of the halfbacks they've got, say Catalans and St Helens, they certainly will make the top 4.
I had a little whisper last night that that Ben Roberts' situation at Castleford might be fluid, shall we say, and that Wigan could be interested, because of course Shaun Wayne's put all his money really on young Williams there, which is a big ask for a young man at this level. And so it was interesting to see if we do have some more player movement and not just in and out of Salford.
But we do need to promote our English players, and George Williams is one of those. And Shaun Wayne made very clear at the start of the season he's going to give him every opportunity as well. It's early days. You've got Matty Smith, a very experienced player, alongside him as well. But I'd hate to think that Wigan would pull the pin on that quickly, then bring in a Ben Roberts.
Well, the big scenario for Wigan is, though, quite clearly, and even Matty Smith struggles when O'Loughlin's not playing. So what Williams needs, and Matty Smith, is O'Loughlin playing a lot more. You know, we know he gets injured a little bit, but if O'Loughlin's playing, then you will see the better of Williams, and you certainly see a lot better of Matty Smith.
And you're not going to do it with just two half-backs either, Chris.
No, you need a pack as well. I'll tell you what really has been encouraging at the start of the season is the Championship. I mean, we're talking about Super League here, but a lot of people are talking about the Championship now, which was simply a forgotten competition, wasn't it, 2-3 years ago. Now you've got massive crowds at Leigh. You've got Featherstone, what was it, 6,000-7,000 the other night? I mean, wow. And that's simply because you got promotion back on the table again this year.
I mean, it's so encouraging, and it's funny that the crowd at Featherstone was bigger than the crowd at Salford, nearly double what it was at Salford, and at Widnes. And Leigh's crowd was bigger than that at Salford. So the Championship and that's the beauty of this system. It's brought into play. Promotion, relegation has brought that back. There's a real feeling at Bradford, Featherstone, Sheffield, Halifax, all these clubs. We could get there.
Are we saying that every minute really counts, Chris?
I think he's counting. I think Moses is counting more of the Championship.
But I mean, it is a case now. I mean, you look at games week in, week out, and Wakefield made a fantastic start, obviously, with their 2 wins, maybe a little bit lucky against Cass in the first game. But when they played against Widnes, you thought, well, you know, Leigh would have given Widnes a much better game, and Bradford would probably given Widnes a much better game. So thank goodness we do have promotion.
I think you're seeing that, you know, a lot of the teams have a big performance and maybe a couple of big performances in them, Dave, but that they struggle to get a real roll, a 4, 5, 6 game winning streak on with that. I'd be surprised if anybody wins 5 or 6 in a row this season.
Well, again, you look at teams like Wakefield, and the calibre of players, what they've got, it's all about consistency. Can they play at that sort of level week in and week out? And at times, with Wakefield players, they won't be able to maintain that. But hey, you would have thought they would have had 2 wins out of 3 for the start of the season.
But Widnes as well, I think they've got off to a decent start, really. They got that opening draw against Wigan, then they lost one, and then they got this big 58-16 win against Wakefield. I think the common denominator, look, Kevin Brown's return was pivotal there. He's such a pivotal player. Obviously, Lloyd White got 4 tries to the hooker. You know,
but is it about playing on that pitch as well, Chris?
The bouncy pitch.
Well, I think the encouraging thing about Widnes, was they did that first game against Wigan without Kevin Brown. He'd gone off with a head injury. I mean, he was fantastic. He was superb against Wakefield. But against Wigan, they showed some real heart. I mean, that's something that Dennis Betts has really brought through.
Dennis Betts has kept the team that he had last year. You knew that last year they were contracting their players. So Dennis Betts has shown faith in these players, and they are rewarding him as well with performance.
Well, when you look again at the halfback partnership there, Hugh Mellor, who come through the Wigan strategy as well, and he is the ideal foil for Brown, because Brown is the main man, he's the main organiser, but Mellor has got speed, he's a good support player. But again, we just mentioned the Championship, you look at the halfbacks in the 2 main teams there in the Bulls and at Leigh. Gaskell, who's an outstanding, he might have found his level now in the Championship, being the main man at Bradford, and then you look at Ridyard and Braley at Leigh, sheer quality there, and the Championship is a quality league. If you look at the fixtures this week, there's some real big games there in the Championship.
Do you think in the Championship score that they're playing for 3rd and 4th places now for the qualifying 8?
Yeah, they are.
Because I think we've only had 2 or 3 weeks, but you look at it and you say, right, that's Leigh and Bradford 1 and 2. Maybe an argument about who finishes top.
Featherstone got the cavalry about to come round, haven't they? They need rescue in a certain way, and Featherstone play Leigh, I think, in a couple of weeks' time. So that's going to be a pivotal
the real big worry in that division is, and what a reality check they've got, is London Broncos.
I think that the RFL were hoping that this might be the backward step that London needed to take a couple forward, Dave. And
it seems like a couple back, doesn't it?
I don't think anyone's seen that. The coach Joey Graham has gone 3 weeks in family reasons. Whether that's a well-worn euphemism for trouble in the camp, I don't know, but things really don't look good.
It's a real shame. He's a lovely fellow, isn't he, Joe? And he seemed to have his head screwed on there, and he seemed to have a real proper plan for London.
He seemed to be building his own team, didn't he?
Yeah, he was. But again, the question I'd like to ask is, at times a coach can only do so much, can't he? The players have got to take some sort of responsibility. The players have got to realise what it means to London by certainly getting that top 4 and trying to get that Super League place back again. And for mine, I think the players so far have let the Broncos down.
Yeah, I think think their big problem though is they hadn't realised how tough the Championship is. There's some good players in the Championship.
I mean, Bradford knew, didn't they? They've got to toughen up, and they found out in that first game at Leigh just how tough it is. And I think you're right, Dave. I think London have underestimated it.
Anybody who wondered at all about that only had to go back to the Challenge Cup game last year when Leigh went to Leeds and scared the bejeebers out of them, give them a right run for the money. So and they've kept that squad together. They've reinforced it with Fui Moi. You know,
Gareth Hock to come in April when he's finally cleared his latest suspension.
If ever he gets off his latest suspension, and yeah, they're the real deal, and it is tough rugby. You earn your money in that division.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're back with plenty more chat in just a moment. Hope that's whetted your appetite. We're also going to be taking the NRL in the next half an hour or so. See you in just a moment. Well, welcome back to Rugby League Back Chat. And has the game ever been under greater threat than it is at the moment in terms of other sports wanting some of the top stars from Rugby League? The news this week that Jared Hayne has just signed for the San Francisco 49ers. Who saw that coming 12 months ago? But obviously the NFL want Rugby League's best players. We've seen Sam Burgess go to Rugby Union. George is talking about maybe following him. Greg Inglis last week, arguably the world's greatest Rugby League player, saying he fancies maybe at some point a dip at Rugby Union. How do we stop this, or can we stop this?
Well, people are mentioning, you know, the salary cap and an increase of money for these individual players. But when you look at the calibre of players who are looking to go to other sports, I don't think it's a money, Dave. To be honest, I just think it's the prestige of, let's say, for instance, with the Sam Burgess with the international calendar and looking for the World Cup. But unfortunately for Sam, it doesn't look as though it's going to be working out for him because, you know, he seems to be struggling in the other courts. I don't really think it's financially. I think it's the prestige of the coverage worldwide. What they're looking for.
Well, Jared Hayne obviously has always fancied playing American football, hasn't he? And that's why he's gone there. But if he's a success, then American football are going to start looking at Rugby League and go, whoa, these athletes are pretty good.
It's a big if, is that, Dave? Yeah. I mean, I would be. Listen, if Jared Hayne is you know an MVP this time next year, if Sam Burgess is playing in the World Cup come this autumn at Rugby Union, which neither of which I think have got a cat in wherever's chance of happening, then we've got a problem. I think the bigger problem to me is that we've got some great players, some great athletes who to me risk losing their own legacy. Sam Burgess could have been an all-time legacy player. He will not be a dual code legacy player. I think he'll come back in 12 months, you know, his body restored because he was taking a heck of a beating in the NRL, and I think we'll probably see the better for it. And I hope we do, and I hope that for Sam's you know, own good really, because he could be a legend and he won't be doing what he's doing.
Just on the Jared Hayne thing, do Parramatta get Joe Montana in return or something like that?
Thoughts pass.
It's a strange one. He's followed his dream, but I remember a story many years ago when Wigan went out to Brisbane and won the World Club Challenge. At the same time, the Denver Broncos were out there, and I remember we all kind of like talked to the Denver guys. They look at Andy Farrell going, he'd make a great linebacker, he would do this. I don't know about Jared Hayne, if that's going to be...
I think it's a publicity stunt. I think San Francisco...
Yeah, but he's left though.
But, it's not a publicity stunt for San Francisco for 49. They're big enough not to need the publicity of some non-rugby league player.
I think they're taking a flyer. I think we'll find out after, you know, after they've had their spring training,
it's remarkable,
after they've had their camps.
It is remarkable though, and it maybe shows and exposes the vulnerability of the sport, that a player right at the top of his game, player of the year, goes to another sport. And we've seen this before. Carmichael Hunt to rules, many players linked to Rugby Union. The sport is under pressure. Look, Joe Burgess, I know he's not had the greatest start to this season, but last season he was a real up-and-coming player, you know, one of those in for Young Player of the Year, and then suddenly he's off to the Sydney Roosters, and I think the deal had been done quite some time before. He's off at the age of 20 to the NRL, and he's an England player.
Do we think that that's a real threat to you know, players staying within league but moving to the NRL?
Of course it is. Look, it does, I think, in some ways come down to the money aspect as well, and it comes down to the salary cap issue as well. The salary cap is 3 times as much in Australia. The next television deal in Australia, talking to a colleague, is going to be $2 billion for NRL, $2 billion Australian dollars. That is massive.
But we can't compete.
Well,
so why would we try to?
There's nothing you can do about that, because it's all right saying raise the salary cap over here. You might have 2 or 3 clubs who might say, okay, but the majority can't afford it.
Well, if you then also if you raise, you know, giving them more money is not going to make them better players. Giving, say, for instance, Gareth O'Brien and Myler £300,000 a year is not going to make them quality international players.
Maybe it comes back to this marquee player and being able to get a signing or something like that. I'm not saying raise the salary. There's no way we can compete. We can't compete against Australian Rugby League, and they can't compete against French Rugby Union and the money that washes around that sport.
Well, they've got to be a success at it, Chris. And so far, the evidence is not that they've been a success.
Well, it comes down. Sam Burgess, and you're right. It's early days in this experiment, but he was part of that England initial squad. He didn't deserve to be there. He's struggling to get in the Bath team. He looks like a fish out of water. Mike Ford, his coach, you know, obviously a great rugby league stock, is saying he's struggling. You know, with the amount of time he's carrying the ball, very few. The line out, scrum, blah blah. He doesn't know where to be positionally.
Okay.
It's a struggle.
Let me just bring in. What about George Ford? What about Owen Farrell? What about Luther Burrell? Three players who would have, in a different age, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would have been rugby league stars.
I was just going to come to that, Dave, and I say also Stephen Myler as well. But I reckon the reason. They realised at 15-16, because as we know, our game has been flooded with overseas players, and in the positions what them lads play, they knew they wouldn't have had much of a chance by progressing playing first team football at 18 and 19 years of age. They took that route there to rugby union, and they've been, you know, quite a success at that sport. They're all international level there. So I reckon they realised at 15-16, hold on, we've just signed an overseas player for 3 or 4 years. It's going to take me a bit of time. I'm better than what he is, so I'm going to go down another line, and that's exactly what
I think if we're giving our young stars a pathway to a prestige competition like the NRL, which is what young Joe Burgess has taken, then that is a better answer for us all around than, you know. And I don't think we can worry about what kids decide at 15-16, Woodsy. But I think that if we're going to be competitive at an international level, then we need lads playing like Gareth Widdop is, like the Burgess boys were, like James Graham is as captain this year at Canterbury. I think they need to be banging heads in the top competition, and there's no argument that the NRL is where that's at.
Well, certainly I think players will look at Sam Burgess and it might make them think. I mean, obviously Sam Tompkins has been mentioned as a possible rugby union player, though I've got a feeling if he does come back, he might actually be to Wigan Warriors.
He'll ask Joel Warner about the experience of rugby union, so he won't go there. But also, I'm with Danny on this one, and I've said it for many years now. The more English players we have playing in the NRL, it's only good. Not just, you know, we're talking about, okay, Super League maybe get a big demise, but quite clearly, it will be far better for our international game and team.
We can ask you this. I remember a famous picture being taken by Andrew Varley all those years ago at Sydney Harbour Bridge, and there's yourself there, there's Ellery Hanley,
Andy Curry, you, Waddell, Sean Edwards, I think Joe Lydon, Martin Afire. It was a great experience. And how close did we get to those in our era from 88 to 94? And it's not rocket science. If you're playing intense rugby league week in and week out, playing against the best week in and week out, then it will make you a better player. And it's looking for that consistency in performance that gets you to that level.
But do we want to see our best stars go into the NRL?
Yeah, we do.
Just for the sake of winning a couple of matches every October, November. What about those months from February through till October when you want to see the best stars over here playing in Super League?
Woodsy, we've just kicked off this programme saying what a great season it's looking to be.
But we're already questioning the quality.
It is. Well,
and when you're talking about the best halves in the game, you're talking about Luke Walsh, Australia. You're talking about Todd Carney, Australia. You're talking about Scott Giroux,
I would
Australia.
be talking about Danny Brough from the Huddersfield Giants, who can't get a game for England anyway. But, you know...
well, the World Club Series suggests that the NRL is better. It was 3-0. They won the trophy.
Only just. Okay. Let me throw this one at you. This is a suggestion. It's not my suggestion, but this is a suggestion which has come from an Australian, from Steve Mascott, who we know well, the Aussie journalist, who's talking about rebranding Super League as the Northern NRL, so that you have two competitions that are running side by side. You've got the NRL in Australia, you've got the NRL in England and France, and that you create a Champions League scenario. We saw the 3 World Club Series matches. They were a success. 20,000, 15,000 going in there. So people want to see that kind of competition. How about we set that up properly so the top 3 from Australia play the top 3 from England every year in this joint competition?
But that's what Russell Crowe, and he came over. Look, and Russell Crowe, in rugby league terms, compared to the parochial people and attitudes.
You're pointing at Daniel Lockwood now.
Yeah, he's got some vision there, and his vision was, okay, you might think Las Vegas, I'd rather have it in Gas Vegas myself, but
you're kidding.
Would you? Would you really? Would you really?
Chris,
maybe I wouldn't. Anyway, top 3 or top 4, he's been talking and banging on about that, and he banged on about that while he was here as well. It's a great idea.
You know, thank the Lord for internationalists like Russell Crowe, you know, because we certainly need more of them from the Australian end of things. NRL North, I think I'd go throw myself off the Sydney Harbour Bridge if we were ever branded that way. I think we've got to live under, if you like, we've got to have some self-respect, Dave. But in terms of growing the international game, you know, we're only going to do that under an England banner. We're not going to do it by, I don't think, by measuring Super League every year against the NRL, because I don't think we match up.
But if we have a competition that the Aussies are genuinely interested in, and it becomes married, the NRL and the Super League, however you brand it, become married together, so that everybody knows it's not just about winning your individual grand finals, it's about what comes after that on the international scene. Does that not sell?
I guess you're looking at maybe what's shortening our Super League to 8 teams, so you're looking at more quality than quantity. I would buy into that scenario, but
8 teams.
Well,
it's not going to get done.
The Super 8.
How many of our quality teams could really compete with the NRL? Could you imagine? Could you imagine what Wakefield playing Canberra, or you know, the Roosters wasn't here, Canterbury wasn't there. You know what I mean? So look, I would say if we're looking at a sort of Champions League sort of formula,
it's got to be legitimate. It's got to be a 1-2-3 versus 1-2-3, and we had one.
It's got to be quality against quality, Dave. It's not got to be 8 for 9.
I think Rugby League has suffered over the years for going a snapshot. This is how it is, so this is how it'll always be. If you do that, if you'd done that 10 years ago, you wouldn't have had Warrington in, because Warrington were very close to relegation when Tony Smith took over. You wouldn't have had Huddersfield.
But we have innovated.
Well, we have now
because they've improved. So your Wakefield.
We're not talking about 10 years. We're not talking about 10 years ago. We're talking about now.
Yeah, but if you talk about moving the game,
well, we're talking about moving the game forward. We're talking about better quality, and also as well, we're talking about keeping our top players in our game.
But if you cut off those 8, who's to say Lee are not going to come in and start challenging for top honours? Why are you saying?
Well, we hope that they do. We hope that they do. We hope, you know, plus a challenge. We want to see a dynamic within the game. There isn't the status quo. But I think that we started off this conversation about the threat to rugby league, and we were talking about the NFL and we were talking about rugby union. I think that we've got to respect the fact that if we're keeping them in league, whether that's Super League or the NRL, then that is the first measure of success for us.
You're right, and it's that international dimension that's going to hopefully help to keep.
That's why Sam Burgess has gone to Union.
That's why Sam Burgess
wants to play in front of 75,000.
He watched and was part of that fantastic World Cup semi-final at Wembley, England v New Zealand, and we got done by Sean Johnson at the end. But he felt that, and I think he wanted more of it. He found that it was available in rugby union, not in rugby league. So growing the international game and growing the World Club Series or whatever it is has got to be the way forward, and do it properly.
And also, we're talking again, international point of view, why do you think the New Zealand Warriors, you know, have gone to a grand final? Why do you think New Zealand have been crowned world champions? Why do you think reigning Four Nations champions at the moment? Because they played in the best league in the world, and it's took a period of time. That's why they're the best in the world. And I'll tell you what, Dave, you mentioned earlier, well, do we want all our players playing in the NRL, you know, and not in Super League because for the international purpose? Of course we do, because I'll tell you what, if we did manage to win, say for instance the Ashes come back maybe one day, we want Great Britain to come back, and then also till we win the Four Nations, we wouldn't realistically care less if it was in the NRL or the Super League. We want to put England.
Yeah, but if you're a Wigan fan, or you're a Warrington fan, or a Leeds fan, you want to go and watch your best players every week. You don't want to think, Callum Watkins is now playing for Canberra, or you want to see Callum Watkins up close and personal every week in, week out. You've got to find a way of keeping them in the Super League.
But these market forces, as they exist at the moment. So how do you change the market forces? Now, can that be done through money or extra competition? You've got to think of different ways. I think. And rugby league is great at innovating, and I think what we've got this season is some innovation, rightly or wrongly. But we've got to innovate to help keep our talent. But the fact is that a 20-year-old Joe Burgess is off, and there are going to be others as well.
That's it. He opens up a spot for another kid who's the next Joe Burgess, or the next Callum Watkins, the next Martin Offiah.
But the thing is, we've got to also grow the game. Look, you look at Australia. It's about Sydney and Brisbane, massive centres of population that have. I think the NRL report
and nothing else.
There's about 1 million people playing the game in Australia. Our major centres of production are Wigan and Wakefield.
And Wigan are now providing most of the players for the England Rugby Union team. So we've got to spread out.
Well, we're doing something right then.
So we're doing something right.
We're doing something.
We need numbers.
But you see, the only way you're going to international rugby league on the map, on the agenda, and properly discussed is if the NRL clubs feel there's something in it for them. That's why international rugby league, England against Australia, New Zealand, hasn't been working as well as we'd want it to work.
Well, I hope that.
So you've got to get that club competition.
Well, yeah, but they're not mutually exclusive, are they? So that's why I'm glad that England are taking the second test this autumn to the Olympic Stadium. I really hope that there's 54,000 people packing that place out, that when England and New Zealand march out in front of that unique atmosphere, that there's a lot of Aussies sat on Bondi Beach thinking, I wish we were there.
That was a statement of faith. That was a statement of faith in the international game by the RFL, and they made a great move. The Olympic Stadium will have staged 5 matches in the Rugby Union World Cup and will be established as a venue. We've got to get 54,000 people packing that gate. It's a place you want.
That's the key. If there's 20,000 there, or 30,000 there, or even 40,000 there, it's going to look bloody awful.
You mentioned then about the Aussies taking the international calendar serious. I tell you what, they have to start because they are no longer number 1 anymore. Exactly. New Zealand are the number 1 international team. So the
with a smaller player pool.
Yeah, and the Australians have to start taking the international calendar more serious, because if not, maybe one day the Aussies could be third in a free-tier competition, eh?
Oh,
how nice would that be?
We'll all sleep nicely that night.
How nice would that be?
He'd enjoy that from Dewsbury, wouldn't he? I mean, England on top. But I mean, the thing, I mean, it's a complicated picture in Australia, isn't it? Because they've got, I think it's something like 40% of the Toyota Cup players, the under-20 players, are qualified for New Zealand. But they're also qualified for Australia as well. And they're also, a lot of them qualified for Samoa and Tonga and Fiji. Do we have to find a way around that to identify players when they're young and say, right, he's going to play for Tonga now, he's going to play for New Zealand, or you've got to make your decision at a younger age?
Those aren't the realities, are they? They aren't. You know, yeah, in a perfect world, that's the way it would be, Dave, but that's not, it isn't a perfect world. And I think that we've got to sort it out at home first.
Yeah.
Because I've been championing the best half-back in Super League for the last 5 years, Danny Brough. And he's wasting away for Scotland, with all due respect to Steve McCormack and the Scots.
Just like Lee Briers did as well.
Just like Lee Briers did.
Just an opportunity missed with probably the most talented half-back.
But Tony Smith, when he was the England coach, could never look at Lee Briers and think, I can manage that guy. Yeah. And yet then he went to Warrington as coach and managed him and made a great team, and how he wouldn't wish to have Lee Briers back now, because he hasn't got an idea of what his half-back combination is.
It makes me laugh because, you know, obviously being an ex-half-back, and quite clearly them two guys, they're not being selected because they're not good enough. They're certainly good enough, and I just find is that the man management, certainly from McNamara, is really, really poor by. Get your heads together, and obviously Danny Brough would love to play for England. We all know that.
Absolutely.
You know, Danny Brough and would they get, win as a Four Nations? I tell you what, we'd be a little bit
We could have won the World Cup.
Fellas, hold that thought. We're running out of time for this particular part of the programme, but hold that thought. We're going to come back in just a short while when we're talking all things NRL. The new season of the NRL kicks off this weekend. Lots of English involvement, much to the pleasure of Danny Lockwood, and we'll be talking about that in just a few moments. Well, welcome back to Rugby League Back Chat for the final segment of our first show this year, and high time we had a look at the NRL, because you'll have already enjoyed the Souths against the Broncos earlier today, but lots more fantastic live action to come on Premier Sports over the weekend. It really does get the mouth watering, doesn't it, the NRL?
It's a truly great competition, isn't it? And in fact, you can see every game now is just such a bonus. I think it's the intensity in which the games are played. You're seeing athletes at the top of the game. You never know with matches just quite what's going to happen. Yep. But there's definitely some clubs, and Souths are among them, who are going to be right up there. And there's going to be some, like Gold Coast Titans, who've had an absolutely dreadful time, and one or two others, Canberra, they don't look too well equipped, are going to struggle this year. But it's a fascinating, tantalising competition.
Yeah, despite losing, you know, our superstar Sam Burgess, I think Souths kick off the season as hot favourites to back up, which is something that rarely happens in the NRL.
Well, Brisbane were the last team to do that, weren't they?
And so. But I think, you know, until we get a few weeks in, and I think until with the NRL, Woodsy, until you get through the State of Origin series, really, it doesn't start to sort itself out. But I think there's a few clubs already that we're going to be looking out for, and certainly the team I'm looking for this year is James Graham's Canterbury Bulldogs. He's the skipper this time, highly thought of. They've bought Brett Morrison, I think, who'll be a real strike weapon for them. They've got a good settled pair of halves. And I think you see a lot of change around the NRL every season. There's a lot of turnover among clubs, but I think the Bulldogs are the ones who, and they're going to be playing Penrith this weekend. And that is, I think we'll get an early marker there for who's going to be front runners.
Well, I think when we do look at the NRL, we're looking at sheer quality, aren't we, week in and week out, and maybe from all the teams, you know, at times, because somebody's got to finish bottom, haven't they? But I think overall the sheer quality, and I think we've got to say congratulations to James Graham by, you know, being named as a captain, because it hasn't happened, you know, to too many English players who have gone down there in many years for that honour. But one team I'm looking for is the West Tigers. They've got a new halfback partnership in young Brooks, who they reckon is a future Australian international. So Come on the Tigers for me.
Pat Richards still doing the rounds as well. The Irish international Pat Richards still doing the rounds at West as well. I think tomorrow it's Parramatta against Manly tomorrow. Luke Burgess making his debut off the bench tomorrow.
He's got a bit of a point to prove as Luke, because his nose was put out of joint a little bit anyway. It was bottom of the sort of Burgess pecking order at South towards the end of last season. So I hope that this is a little bit of a renaissance for Luke. He had a bit of trouble in the off-season too, so he's got a point to prove. But he's a strong-willed character, and I think he'll have a good go around this time. Yeah,
Manly have got the problems as well. I mean, they've got Daly Cherry Evans and Kieran Foran coming off contract at the end of the year. A lot of speculation about them, but they're a good club. It's great ground to play out there at Manly as well.
At the Brookvale Oval, yeah. And I think one thing that they will miss, and that I know Manly Sea Eagles fans are really sore about, is the loss of Glenn Stewart. Okay, the Bunnies have lost Sam Burgess, but they've brought in Glenn Stewart. He's only 31. But he's got more miles on the clock than anybody, and big game experience. He's a proven champion, and I think he is probably the single big piece of recruitment in the NRL.
I think also as well another player we'll be looking for. He was outstanding for Wigan for 2 years in Blake Green, going back down there. Will he be able to handle the pressure week in, week out in Central League for the Melbourne Storm and being their main playmaker?
What about
one to watch?
One or two of the other English lads? Josh Hodgson gets a start this week. For Cameron.
I like Hodgson.
Encouraging for him.
I like him very much, and obviously Ricky Stewart has seen a lot of him, isn't it? You know, so I hope it goes well for him. His attitude's good, his enthusiasm at time. You know, he played okay for England when he came on there. So yeah, I think
he's a physical,
okay.
He's a nuggety kind of player. I think he'll relish in the high impact, high speed nature of the NRL. And I think he'll be a solid performer for them. Big
season for Mike Cooper, because he was under the radar last year, wasn't he? I think he missed 1-2 games the whole season. He's off the bench this week for St George's. He missed the England trip, didn't he? Because his missus has given birth. Well done, by the way. He's a new baby.
But he did tremendously well, because who would have thought Mike Cooper wasn't a huge name at Warrington, and yet he's gone down there. And he's played superbly. He's established himself in that team. And look, any English player like that establishing themselves in an NRL team, that's
I mean, Gareth Ellis did it in absolutely superb
style. But Gareth Ellis followed on from Adrian Morley, was very much a trailblazer of the kind of modern day age. And then we had Gareth West, Player of the Year for 3 seasons.
I think so another one who's under the radar is Ben Crooks. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him at Hull under Radford, but Peter Gentle, who's the assistant coach at Parramatta, he's taken him there. Under Peter Gentle, Hull, he was outstanding. I think he was pretty close to getting an England appearance, scored 20 odd tries, outstanding season. So Ben Crooks could have a huge, if he gets a first team start, have a huge season for the Parramatta Eels as well.
That's the key though, isn't it? Because Greg Eden has been picked up by Brisbane, but is he going to get much of a start?
I'm going to ask that. Is he going to get anywhere near a first team place?
Well, if he proves himself, he is, but he's got to convince super coach Wayne Bennett ahead of a raft of stars.
I'll tell you what Greg Eden's got to do. He's got to get out of his head, listen to that quote. I think, was it Nathan Brown says he's better than Billy Slater?
He said he could be the next Billy Slater.
Well,
he could be the next Billy Slater.
Well, to be honest with you, I think Greg Eden still believes that. That's why he's still in cloud cuckoo land at times, because he's nowhere near.
Well, however good Greg Eden is or can be, or Ben Crooks for that matter, this competition will find them out, and they'll know how good they are. And that's why I liked about the Mike Cooper situation, is that he went under the radar, and I think it's getting that first season under your belt. He got a lot of match time, he impressed the people who count, and I think he will move on this year. I think he'll be a real England contender for the end of the season.
And I'll tell you what as well, because I know from my experience playing out there, if you show the quality that they expect you to show, you will get a start week in and week out, and if you put that consistency, they won't budge you, they will keep you there.
It's not about reputation.
It doesn't matter if you're English, Australian, Kiwi or whatever, if you're performing week in and week out, you will stay there and they will give you the opportunity.
Big season for Sam Tompkins as well. I mean, last year went with a big fanfare, less of a fanfare because they know what's coming now, but he had a slowish start last year. He really has to razzle-dazzle this year.
He's not lived up to the billing just yet, has he? You know, but I mean, Sean Johnson is the guy that a lot of people in the NRL are going to be looking to this year. I think theirs was a foundling sort of relationship last year. I think it needs to move on. I think that the Warriors need to find how to win away from home. And a big year is expected from a guy with a big pay packet.
I think he might actually benefit by the spotlight being off him in that respect. He can just go and play his game. He's a super talented player. We know that, and he can perform on that stage. We know that as well. But I think it's time to kick on.
But he has to.
He has to now. Yeah. Yeah, it's an unforgiving competition.
Do you get the feeling the game in Australia is changing a little bit in the way it's struck? Because it has been a very structured game, hasn't it? And there's been a bit of criticism of that of late. Physical, fantastic to watch, but maybe a little dull. Do you get the feeling that coaches might be evolving this year and we'll see a more open game, a more risk game?
Well, I think it showed the skill what they've got when they played St Helens 2 weeks ago, didn't it? You know, they have got the skill factor there. But at times in the NRL, it has been, even in my days at time, you know, they just be conservative for a certain period of time, and then they're up for opportunities. But early in the games now, I think they will be looking to express themselves and play that expansive rugby league. As I said 2 weeks ago, we know exactly what sort of skills they've got, and
but really,
quite outstanding.
A really interesting comment from Tony Smith 2 weeks ago when Warrington played St George Illawarra Dragons, and he said, you know, when you look at the game, the Aussies very good going down the middle, but he said, look at how much yardage we got going out wide early on. You know, they didn't expect that.
I'm not sure that they have. I'm not sure they're going to see anything radically different this year. I think it doesn't help the competition, if you like, that they've lost two stellar footballers in Sam Burgess and Sonny Bill Williams, two of the greatest offloading big men I've ever seen. And Jared Hayne, who of course could score out of nowhere. So I think we'll see a little bit of more of the same. It's all about the numbers, mostly for Australian coaches. But we always see games opening up. We see some real thrillers, and they've got guys that can finish like nobody on earth. So it'll be more of the same for mine.
It will be. There's one big difference, I think, between the NRL and Super League. And I think the kicking game in the NRL is infinitely superior. And it was infinitely superior in that World Club Series. Adam Reynolds for South Sydney against Saints had the ball on a string all night.
Chris, hold on. They've got Adam Reynolds. Says they've got John Wilkin. Do me a favour, please. We've got a second row.
Yeah, well, to be fair to John, he's a second row having to play.
Luke Walsh wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. But to be honest with you, if I were John Wilkin, I would say, listen, I can't bring anything playing at scrum after this St Helens team. I don't care less what anybody says. He is not a halfback, and he hasn't got a quality kicking game. Well, play Johnny Lomax. Put Wellens at fullback and put Johnny Lomax at 7. For him to play with Travis Burns, there's your answer. John Wilkin is not a halfback, and I just cannot buy into him why St Helens keep playing him there.
Regardless of that, Scully, I think the kicking
game... It's not regardless. He hasn't got the quality kicking game that's required.
No, but in the NRL, they have. And I think that
they've got it in
difference. And the other thing as well is that it's the little things. Doing the little things right, not knocking on and dropping the ball, doing things right at the right time and executing plays.
That's called pressure. And that comes from week in, week out, intense rugby league, it's called pressure.
Exactly. And that's why we need more young English stars going down to the NRL.
Correct. There's your answer, Woodsy.
And then England win the Four Nations, the World Cup, Sam comes back and we all live happily ever after.
I tell you, just going back to this weekend, I tell you what I'm looking forward to is the Cowboys against the Roosters, because the last game the Cowboys played was that sensational game which we saw on Premier Sports last year, the playoff game when they were losing 30-0. They got it back, they nearly won it, they ended up losing 31-30. Jonathan Thurston was just untacklable.
Yeah, he's probably still, you know, the odds-on favourite for the Dally M again. He is a generational player. And we have one team we haven't mentioned is the Melbourne Storm, where, you know, you've got Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk, Cameron Smith, all about 32 now, all getting on it. It'll be interesting to see. I know you said Blake Green's gone back down there. It'll be interesting to see if they've got it in them one more time around again. Suffer
at Origin time as well. That's the nucleus of the Queensland side as well. Melbourne might suffer a little bit at that time. But the Roosters, I think that's a key game as well. The Roosters,
Mitchell Pearce.
Yeah, they look really strong again. You know, under Trent Robinson. And again, it's about two
they've lost
Michael Maguire at South is about two former Super League coaches as well, doing it at the highest level.
Come on, mention the West Tigers. How good are they?
West Tigers will be good.
They'll be right there in Sydney.
We shall see. We shall see. That Cowboys-Roosters game, by the way, I think is 10 o'clock on Saturday. So you don't have to get up too early for that. All the games on Premier Sport are all live as well, so you've no excuse for missing any of the action that's taking place. What are you looking forward to this weekend?
I think the Roosters. I want to see how the Roosters get on, because I think if there's one team that's going to really challenge South, it's Trent Robinson's side. I'll be intrigued to see how they get on this weekend.
Yeah, sheer quality, but as I say, I'm not going away from the Tigers. New halfback combination, looking to play smart, attractive rugby league. Yeah, come on, the Tigers.
Notwithstanding the fact that the Roosters have Steve McNamara on their coaching staff.
What is he? A water carrier? Is he a water carrier or something?
He's been promoted this year.
What is he? What is he now?
Well, he's got a radio now instead of a water ball.
I think you've been harsh on Steve.
I think we're being unfair. I think the Roosters are not going to go forward this year. They've lost Sonny Bill. They've lost Frank Paul Nusala. I'm looking for the Canterbury Bulldogs. I'm looking for James Graham, you know, the the English sort of
I tell you what,
flag
James,
in the sand guy to lead his team all the way.
James Graham with that responsibility, we know how good he's been without the responsibility, but could he even win the Dele M award this year?
Well, Sam would have had it last year, but for his sort of discretions, which cost him a few starts and a lot of Dele M points. But I think that James Graham won't be far off this year.
He's a real change character, isn't he, James Graham? We noticed that when we went down under for the Four Nations, because he was captain for England, wasn't he, for a couple of games? Who was injured? Who was supposed to be captain for England?
O'Loughlin.
Sean O'Loughlin was injured, and he really has changed the way he handles himself with the media. He's learnt an awful lot. You're talking about English players going over there and learning from the environment. He's learnt an awful lot from that environment while he's been over there.
Well, it's a goldfish ball over there, isn't it? Every move, you know, it's you looked at all the time, you know, from when you go training, when you leave training, if you go to the restaurants, you know, Sam Burgess will tell you that. Even at times, I will tell you that. Even Ellery himself, when he was out there, you know, you're in a goldfish ball, and the way that he's matured himself, not just as a player but as a person, and well, he's outstanding, isn't it? Simple as that.
Yeah.
And he will be probably the next England captain.
Yeah.
And do you think? I think as well. I mean, we talk about him, but do you think the twins as well, the Burgess twins, that they're going to be right up there as well?
Well, I still wonder what must be going around their heads just down the road at Headingley Stadium here, where they had those two lads on the academy and let them go a few years ago, because
Leeds let Jason Robinson go many years ago.
They just didn't think they had it in them, and I would.
Well, I'll tell you what as well, because I think it was 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. Maybe 3 years ago, and I watched Tom play at Lee against the Australian schoolboys. Absolutely outstanding. I'm thinking to myself, why isn't he playing? Why isn't he playing first team football for the Bradford Bulls? His quality. Couldn't get a start there. This is what I'm saying here, Dave, earlier when we mentioned about the rugby union, the lads thinking at 15, 16, there's players in my position here who overseas, I'm ready now for first team football. Yeah. They haven't been given that opportunity. The Burgess boys, certainly Tom from 3 years ago, what is he now? Superstar. The Australians will give British talent the opportunity if they're good enough, and these boys quite certainly prove they're good enough.
You get the feeling that George could be the next Sam as well, don't you?
Oh yeah,
George is the one who's already making his mark over there.
He's always sort of had his nose that little bit in front of Thomas, hasn't he? And a lot of that comes from, I think, an inner maturity as well as the physical stuff. There's, you know, if they say you're big enough, you're old enough, those boys should have been playing first team at 15.
I agree.
And look, George Burgess in the game against Saints, I thought he was brilliant. He was brilliant.
Well, he got the man of the match, didn't he? Yeah. And it was deservedly so. And I think he has grown into that sort of out of Big Brother Sam's shadow. You know, time for me to step up. This is my moment.
There was a stat a couple of years ago. I think it was 40% of South tries come off the back of a George Burgess play the ball, because bang, he hits the line, gets up, plays it. You've got Isaac Luke coming out of the back of him, and within that play, they score so many tries.
A bit like Sam, he's got those fast feet. You know, for such a big piece of human being, he can move through the line laterally as well as steamroll you to death. And
I think the highest compliment what the guys are getting at the moment, because the highest compliment the forwards can have is that they're all being rated in the same class as Malcolm Reilly when Malcolm played out there for Manly. So for them to be rated in that sort of category of the legendary Malcolm, I tell you what, they are performing quality rugby league week in and week out. There's no two ways about that.
And they're flying the flag for the Super League as well. It just shows the quality that exists in the Super League.
Do you think they actually take notice, the NRL?
I would like to think so. They're coming more and more to Super League to find the talent.
They've taken notice of Trent Robinson and Michael Maguire.
Just a last word on this. And I talked to Ian Millward during the Four Nations about Darryl Clark and saying about how he was a surprise package for the Australians. He went, we've known about Darryl Clark since he was 17 and 18. They know about every British youngster who's coming through because the scouts are over here and the agents are making sure they're alerted. So there's another danger sign as far as the English game is concerned. Maybe even the young ones will be going before they've started playing in Super League. Who knows? But lots of great NRL to look forward to this weekend and every weekend right here on Premier Sports. Hope you've enjoyed this first Rugby League Back Chat, and we'll see you in a month's time. Goodbye.